and is currently working as a project fellow and an executive member at Anveshi Research Centre for Women's Studies in India. Venerable is a core group member of the National, I can't pronounce this properly, Ecumenical Forum of Gender and Sexual Minorities at the National Council of Churches of India, and a fellow Salzburg Global LGBT Forum. They are one of the founding members of Telangana, Hijra, Intersex, Transgender, Samiti, and Queer Swabhimana Yatra. Venerable is also a student of Buddhist philosophy and psychology, and the primary areas of research are community building, faith, religion, mental health, and queer rights and their intersection. So today's session is going to be interactive, so please feel free to participate either through chat or unmute yourself. And without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Venerable.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you, Meta Center, for having me here for this session today. And thank you, all of you, for joining and being here with me. I mean, well, before we begin any, general Buddhist practice that we begin anything that we do, we try and check our motivation and intention for why we are here and why we are doing whatever we are doing at this moment. So quickly take a moment to bring your body and mind to one place where you are, in whatever posture you are, and reflect upon your intention and motivation of being here. Whatever that could be, we all do have our own individual motivations and intentions for the things that we do. Just reflect upon that. And see if you can add a little bit of positive intention to already existing intention, whatever that might be. That you are here, we all are here today to interact with each other, to engage with each other, to learn from each other, not just for our sake, but for the sake of all sentient beings, especially those who are in great suffering, for their well-being, for us to become skillful, and for us to be able to help these beings in the best way that we can. Set a strong motivation in that way. I'll do a small refuge prayer, twice in Tibetan, once in English. Sangye chodang shoki chognam la jangchu bardu dagni kepsu chi dagi jinso gipe sonam gi drola penchir sangye drupar sho. Sangye chodang shoki chognam la jangchu bardu dagni kepsu chi dagi jinso gipe sonam gi drola penchir sangye drupar sho. I take refuge in Buddha Dhamma and the Supreme Assembly until I attain enlightenment, for the sake of all sentient beings, by depending on my practice of virtues such as generosity and others. As we have taken refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and as we move, before we begin the session today, I mean, when I committed to the June 1st date, I didn't realize back then that it is I mean, this marks my 5th year of being a monastic, completing 5 years of being a monastic. So I'm very happy to be on this day with you all here to interact, to engage, to converse with you all. Just before we begin, I want to say that most often when any of us talk about, when any of us even think about any kind of spiritual engagement, right? Whether it is a meditation or whether it is even a conversation about faith, religion, spirituality, certain practices, often we all tend to kind of get serious. I think certain amount of seriousness seeps in. We become stern. It's sort of kind of becomes a very serious affair, like kind of very scary thing, something suddenly we need to think about death, impermanence and all that. But I really believe that need not be the case. Any spiritual engagement, is an adventure, but necessarily not a scary one. It can be a joyful one if we, are mindful about it, and if we put in enough humor into it, I think. So it could be full of surprises, challenges, difficult encounters, but nothing to be really scared of, I think. I mean, each of us are not in the spiritual journey by ourselves. I think we are held by so many fellow seekers, practitioners, teachers, friends, those we know and those we don't know also, those we met, those we probably would never meet. So many of us are part of this fellowship of self-discovery, discovering our true potential of kindness, love and compassion, to heal ourselves and to help heal others. So we'll try and keep the joy and humor in the room, I think, as much as possible, not become serious about it. At least we'll try not to. So having said that, as much as I believe now, I did a refuge prayer, taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. I also believe that there are 3 other important sources that I often remind myself to rely on, because I believe it is important in our everyday practice. So we will quickly do a small contemplation of also seeking reliance on these 3 sources. Whatever position you are in, get into a comfortable posture. Sitting on a ground chair, have a erect straight back, just to ensure we are awake, not in a state of, I know it is 7 o'clock in the evening, cold, cozy, I would fall asleep, I know. So yeah, we'll try and stay awake, and we'll simply contemplate on relying on 3 other sources in our life that I also personally believe to be important, along with Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So we try and contemplate on those 3 sources. Before that, we'll just try and do a couple of minutes breathing exercise, just calm ourselves down and to stabilize our mind and breathing and mental state. So just scan through your body from top of your head. Think that there's a relaxed feeling in the top of your head, a relaxed feeling generated on the top of your head. And have this relaxed feeling slowly seep into your face, sides of your face, your eyes, your nose, your neck, having your entire face relaxed. Let this relaxed feeling travel through back of your body, through entire back, relaxing your straight back, releasing it from any tension, any stress. Let this relaxed feeling travel through your hands, your fingers, all through your arms, relaxing them. And let this relaxed feeling travel to the front part of your body, your chest, your abdomen, relaxing them. Relaxing even the internal organs, your stomach, heart, lungs. Let this relaxed feeling travel through your lower part of your body, through your thighs, knees, all the way to the tip of your toes. Relaxing it completely. Just scan through your body from top of your head to the tip of your toes. See that it is completely relaxed. Gently close your eyes. Settling into this relaxed state of body. And now slowly bring your focus to your breath. You can place your focus in front of your nostrils, where the air is going in and coming out at its own natural pace. Don't force it in or push it out, but focus on the natural pace of your breath. Whatever the thoughts, distractions that come up, don't get carried away by them. The moment you recognize you're distracted, gently bring back your focus to your breath. No matter how many times you get pulled away by your thoughts, gently come back to focus on your breath. We try and keep our focus on breath for the next couple of minutes. Whatever the thoughts come, do not identify yourself with them. Do not engage with them, but simply bring your attention back to your breath. As we have taken refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, now we also seek refuge in our own self, the self that is kind, loving, caring, and nurturing. Recall to your mind a particular moment, a situation, when you felt this connection with your own compassion, with your own kinder self. Could be any moment, could be at your home, could be at your work, or on the street, in your neighborhood. Recognize that compassionate self. See the potential of your compassion, of that moment, and to be much more ahead. Reconnect with that and rejoice in your compassion. Seek refuge in that potential of your compassionate self. Moving on, we seek refuge in people around us, people who have been kind and compassionate to you in your life. We do not seek refuge in them just as individuals. We seek refuge in their goodness that touched us, helped us, and healed us. We take refuge in their kind, warm hearts that not only care for us, but also inspire us to do the same for others. Recollect to your mind any one such person in your life. Remind yourself the immense love and kindness they've showed it on you. Think about all the love and care they carry in their hearts and minds. And see how that is a possibility for you too. And we seek refuge in it. Thirdly, we seek refuge in the communities we live in, the communities of people that we exist with. The communities that we work with, we engage with whom we share our experiences. We seek refuge in the people of these communities, especially the people, those who are difficult to us, those with whom we disagree. We seek refuge in all the opportunities they give us to practice and nourish our kindness and warm-heartedness. Recognize that it is because of them that we have the moments in our life when we are able to practice loving kindness. They are our teachers. Recognize how important and essential they are for our practice. And we seek refuge in the opportunities provided by these communities and people in it. As we seek refuge in our own potential of goodness and in the goodness of people that are kind to us, and in the difficultness of the people who disagree with us. Just sit with it for a moment, recognizing how important these three sources are for our practice, our progress on the path, for our own realizations and learnings. Whatever conclusion you arrive at, just sit with it for a moment. Now, gently, slowly open your eyes. Thank you for being with me there. Before I begin the topic of the session, I'll begin with my regular standard disclaimer that please do not be misled by my robes. I have no wisdom to share other than some stories and some experiences and some thoughts, which may interest some of you and may not also. So nonetheless, thank you for being here again. So of course, my robes tell you that I'm attempting to live a life of a monastic. And my introduction Elise gave, or the bio in the Meta Center website will tell you I'm a human rights, LGBT, queer rights activist based out in Hyderabad in South India. So I engage with both the Buddhist world as well as the world of social activism, community work, with almost a similar diligence and commitment. And I consider both of them to be equally important on my path to liberation, equally important for my practice as a Buddhist in my spiritual journey and spiritual engagement. So I believe my activism gives a much needed, critical insight into the Buddhist world and the practices. And also similarly, the practices of the Buddhist world of Buddha Dhamma give me a skillful insight into the socio-political activism I do. So fortunately, this is not a unique thing with me. There were and there are a great many teachers of our time who have proven the symbiotic relationship between spirituality and socio-political work with their own lives, with the kind of the work they have done and continue to do. For example, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Martin Luther King Jr., and many more. All these people have displayed the possibility and the potential that spirituality and political activism could benefit from each other and in turn benefit the larger world. So even these great people being around, having their stories touched our lives, having known their experiences, their teachings, it's kind of a tricky path, I think, for all of us in this human complicated world. How does one facilitate a fruitful engagement between spirituality and political activism and vice versa? Most importantly, the challenge is to know when to engage and when to disengage. When you can be active and when to step back, especially the political activism in this kind of the current world that we live in. There is always a crisis. There is always a new problem. Every day we wake up to new crisis in our world, especially if one is actively paying attention and willing to be part of the everydayness of changes that are happening and also the new problems that are arising in our world. So it becomes difficult. How do we engage, or how do we not engage, or when do we engage, when do we not engage with any of these things becomes quite a tricky task, because if you attempt to engage at these things, it's also exhausting, it's also tiring. No matter with all the support and resources, it is still a tiring affair because it's emotionally, physically, both exhausting. And if you do not choose to engage, it also seems to look like a selfish act, that not being part of these things, not taking an active role in the socio-political environment that we live in, could also feel, especially if one is practicing as a Buddhist, if one is talking about helping other beings, not taking part can also feel quite a difficult task. So how do we navigate and negotiate when to take this active role, when to step back, is something that doesn't have a black and white yes and no answer, right or wrong answer, but something that we all have to figure out as individuals, I believe, as we go forward. But of course, one can also say the simplest answer to when to engage, not to engage is that, hey, don't engage until you become a Buddha. See, you're not skillful, so until you become a Buddha, don't engage at all. But what if the path to Buddhahood itself is this engagement, both spiritual and political as such? That what if there is no way to Buddhahood in our current modern world without having both spiritual and political engagement? That makes it, not only necessary, it becomes a requirement for us to actually engage. So what then? We can't still say that, oh, I'm not enlightened, I've not become a Buddha, I've not attained my Nibbana, so I'm going to step back, I'm not going to do anything, because this often becomes a thing, I think, often, especially within the spiritual communities that practice, that are deeply invested, within the monastic communities for that matter, I think, invested so much in studying and practicing the Buddha's teachings. How do we see the society and how do we engage with the society? Do we just keep to our own practice? And does this practice mean only practice of Buddha's teachings, or does this practice mean anything more than that? Is something to be figured out, I think, but also something very clear and obvious if one really pays attention to what Buddha has taught us, I think. Buddhism and social activism, clearly does have a very visible common ground. Both of them really aim at removing suffering. The former is to attain the ultimate wisdom, ultimate freedom from suffering. And the later one, the Buddhism talks about how to become ultimately free of all the suffering for once and all. And whereas the social activism, political activism is talking about how do we remove the conventional worldly suffering, right? So, but nonetheless, if one looks at Buddhism, it is not simply talking about just getting rid of the ultimate suffering, but it is also talking about how do we manage and mitigate the conventional suffering also in our everyday life. It is not just about you suffer until you ultimately become free, but you also try and mitigate and lessen the suffering as you move towards ultimately becoming free from the suffering. So that way, Buddhism has the aspects both that are conventional, that are addressing the conventional ultimate suffering. And when you look at the Four Noble Truths, you know, the truth of suffering, causes of suffering, and the truth of cessation of suffering, and the path of cessation of suffering. Truth of suffering, both, you know, Buddhism acknowledge, you know, the first step is to acknowledge that there is suffering. In all political social activisms, we do acknowledge that there is suffering, whether it is political, social, economical, there is suffering. And there are various causes of the suffering. In Buddhism, we say ignorance, attachment, aversion. And in general, the conventional world and in the socio-political world, the suffering is because of systemic, structural oppression, discrimination, poverty, war, so on, right? And both these worlds, the political activism as well as the Buddhist practice, acknowledge that there is a cessation to this suffering, that there is an end to this suffering. And there, Buddhism proposes, you know, in some traditions, the Eightfold Path, in other traditions, some other, you know, categorized in some other way, but there is a path to end this suffering. And in political world, the means to end this suffering is democracy, equality, rights, good policies, you know, community building. This becomes the work. So, but the interesting part to look at is that socio-political movements, in my own experience of being an activist for more than a decade and engaging with various communities, what I've always found quite difficult is that many socio-political movements seek the liberation of a larger society from the suffering, from the oppression, from the discrimination and all that, but somehow misses how to think about individuals becoming free of this suffering. Even before one thinks about, even as one thinks about the larger society becoming free of it. So people and oppressive systems, individuals and oppressive systems, they basically feed into each other. The only way to dismantle the oppressive systems is to uproot the origin of this oppressive system, whatever the system and the structure that might be. And the origin is often human mind. The origin is not somewhere else, but the origin is human mind. Which Buddhist festival, sorry, Buddhist teachings help us in terms to look into our own mind and to actually uproot this from our mind. Whereas socio-political movements, in some sense, do not do that. I mean, somehow have not arrived there to do that. But if you look at Buddhism in that sense, as an organized, institutionalized faith, also has its own problems and challenges. It's not all rosy as everyone wants to paint it, I think, because it's an institutionalist faith. It has, after 2,500, 600 years after Buddha, it has become a huge institution, a system, a mechanism in itself that has patriarchy, that has sexism, that has misogyny, that has discrimination in various levels within Buddhist communities. So the larger systemic structural oppressions, you know, I believe the socio-political engagement is what helps even the Buddhist world to look into. As we all are busy looking into our own minds, I think it is also important looking to the Buddhist world structure and system and see how that structural systemic oppression can be addressed within the Buddhist world also, I think. So that way, I believe both Buddhism, Buddha's teachings, Buddhist faith, as such, the socio-political movement can actually help each other, benefit from each other, to become more better, to become more skillful, more beneficial, and more, you know, progressive in that sense, I think. So, but as I think about it, you know, that one thing that comes to my mind is that Buddha Dhamma does exist in a conventional world. No matter what we talk about, you know, Nibbana and enlightenment, Buddha Dhamma exists in, you know, conventional world. I remember one of the teachers says, one of the Tibetan teachers says that, you know, the day before you get enlightened, the garbage that you need to, you know, get rid of is the Buddhism itself, the Buddhist ideology itself. That all you also need to become free of that to be actually enlightened. So Buddhism does exist in conventional world. Buddha Dhamma exists in the conventional world, and one has to practice in such a world. So, for example, in India, often there used to be an old saying that if you have difficulties with the household life, if you have difficulties with the everyday life, you know, you go away to Kasi, which is current day Banaras, or you go away to Himalayas in order to seek peace and quiet. That's something which is quite popular notion even today in the Indian middle class and lower middle class especially Hindu communities. So, but in the modern world, we still do that, I think, everywhere in the rest of the world. Even in the modern world, we still do that. But only now, I think we seem to travel into the landscape of smartphones, hopping from Facebook to Twitter to Instagram to, I think. So we seem to travel from one virtual world to other world in order to seek peace and quiet or avoid some amount of stress and suffering. But which is also evidently clear that it is not working. This is not really helping. So there is no escape from this conventional world of suffering, unless, the only way is through it. There is no way around it. There is no way above it, but the way is through it. So, and again, we are here at the point of, okay, if the way is through the conventional world, and the aspiration to seek ultimate freedom from samsara is through samsara, how do I engage with samsara? And how do I not engage with samsara? So often engagement is quite a, like our, engagement in terms of action, like our Hollywood movies and even Bollywood movies, I think is very action packed. It is often very confused with a certain amount of aggression, the certain amount of competitiveness, right? But the action, the engagement doesn't need to be a synonym to aggression. The engagement doesn't need to be a synonym to this fast-pacedness that we seem to have arrived at in the world. So much so, recently I was in a very difficult meeting, a meeting with friends, people I've known for a long time, but we have disagreements. So there's a back and forth of exchange happening. And in that exchange happening, it was my turn to respond back, and I had something to say, but I was still grasping and grabbing my thoughts and what to say, right? And but there was certain sense of urgency and certain sense of compulsion that I could feel. I need to say it. I need to say it in certain pace. I need to put my point and I need to finish it. Like there was not a moment I could think, oh, I can go slow. I don't need to really rush into it. But it's a meeting. I should not take more time. I should put my point and not take more space. So we all seem to have confused engagement with some sense of urgency always, that begin, end, conclude. Like there is that sense of urgency and rage that we get into, I think, and that necessarily is not engagement. I think we even to think about when to engage, when not to engage, one has to think about what does engagement even mean. Without really having certain clarity of what engagement means, knowing when and when not to engage is going to become tricky, I think. And in terms, engagement has to be, when you think about the 6 paramitas of the Buddha Dharma, generosity, patience, morality, joyful effort, wisdom and concentration and wisdom. Engagement is, one has to be generous. Generous about what? One has to be generous about leaving enough room for us to do mistakes. We are never generous enough with our own mistakes. We always have to be right. We always have to be the last person to speak. We always should have the last word or last action. But there is no room for mistakes. There is no room for our own mistakes, let alone room for other people's mistakes. So in our own engagement, can we be generous with our own mistakes? It's okay if I'm wrong once, twice, thrice. I'm still learning. I'll be still generous. And is there room for joy and fun in this engagement? Any engagement, political engagement or everyday engagement at work or home, is there joy and fun? So one of my teachers says that all these 6 paramitas being one, in one part, the 7th paramita is sense of humor. If there is no sense of humor, no matter what kind of great engagement it is about, fighting racial injustices, fighting caste, gender discrimination. If there is no sense of humor, this engagement becomes quite a tiring job. And exactly, we don't need the patriarchy, we don't need race injustice to tire us and exhaust us. We will be doing the job for them by actually being so serious and tiring ourselves, by not having sense of humor, by not having fun and joy. We're actually losing the half battle, half of the effort right there by becoming so serious. And I think often the problem is also because seriousness and discipline are considered to be one and the same, which is again not the thing. When you're engaging, of course you need discipline, but discipline means commitment. Discipline means diligence. Discipline means making a promise to keep up with things and continue with things even when they are difficult. It doesn't mean we have to be serious. It doesn't mean we have to be rigid and constrained in so many ways, right? And somehow in all our schools and colleges, discipline seem to have eventually changed. When people talk to me as a monastic, often ask, oh, you must have such a disciplined life, such a serious life. I'm like disciplined, but not necessarily serious at all. I enjoy waking up in the mornings. I take joy in, doing my prayers in the morning and meditation. So, and I'm flexible also with those things. I'm not so rigid that if someday my routine slightly changes, I'm not going to, oh, this is terrible. I woke up late today. The day is gone just in that moment. So there is some amount of looseness. There's some amount of fun and not this rigid seriousness about discipline, I think. And in the engagement, again, in the process of engaging, we also become trickier about, we might begin at one point, okay, we want to engage with so and so thing for so and so reasons. But eventually we might continue the engagement for various other reasons. The reasons we have begun with no more might be the reasons why we are continuing to engage. Like, for example, I see, or I've seen myself in the activist world, is that, oh, I begin, okay, this is the thing I need to do. This is the right thing and all that. But eventually, I remember one of my friends taught me many years back that there is a difference between activism and activistism. That you are an activist, you do what is right, but are you doing it because it is right and good and beneficial? But are you doing it because you, as an activist, you feel that it is right, you feel that it is good, right? It becomes about the person rather than the work. So it is important to be watchful about attachment, I think. We could become so attached to our work. One thing more dangerous than being wrong or fundamental is, I think, being self-righteous. And when we do any kind of political engagement, we often tend to become self-righteous without even realizing and recognizing that I am right, I'll always be right. And I know what is best. I am politically correct. So getting into that kind of place is one has to be watchful, I think. And how does one has to be watchful? I think from time to time to step back, because often, like I said, engagement seems to be a continuous thing. And there is no space for stepping back. There is no, and often stepping back is seen as a sign of weakness, or is seen as a sign of a laziness or unwillingness to take up the challenges. But in fact, what I've learned and what I've learned in my own experience and from experiences of my other comrades in the movement and activism and everything, is the stepping back is essential. Stepping back is important. Stepping back is not like in Buddhism, when we say retreat, I'm in a retreat. Retreat literally means that I'm retreating. I am stepping back from my everydayness of life to actually contemplate, reflect, and think. So stepping back in the everyday life, in the socio-political engagement, is not just important and necessary, it is essential for the kind of the work that we do. Because our kind of work, when you're engaging with systems and structures and all that, we all also have this, we all have in Buddhism, we all do learn that we have a potential to be good, potential to be kind, loving, and caring. But what we all also, I think, seem to keep a remembrance on is that we all also have the potential to become fundamental. No matter who we are, what side of politics we stand on, whether it is right-wing politics or left-wing politics, we all have the potential to become fundamental. And when I say become fundamental, it simply means, like Pema Chodron says, that we have the potential to close our heart, harden it, and close our mind, become judgmental, and conclusive about things. So we all can be that fundamentalist, whether it is right-wing politics or left-wing politics or liberal politics, doesn't matter. We can be fundamentalist. A stepping back is to ensure that we are not becoming fundamental in our approach, fundamental in our practice, fundamental in our engagement, with closed and rigid heart and mind. That is what one has to avoid. And stepping back is also not about giving up, but stepping back is also about taking care of ourselves. Stepping back is also about being patient. And often, like I said, we don't have room for our own mistakes. We don't have certainly room for other people's mistakes. And we often are very impatient with our own, impatience. We are not patient with our impatience at all. We get agitated with our own impatience, and we are striving for our patience. We want to be patient, but we are very impatient of not being patient. So it's a very tricky world that we try to make up for ourselves, I think, in that sense. And, and also when you step back, that means there is disengagement. When you're disengaging, and often disengaging is seen as inaction, but disengaging is an action in itself. Like Venerable Tashi says, Tichnathan says that there is, there can be meditation in action when you're going out and working. There can be meditation in it while you're helping people, while you are, doing things. At the same time, there can also be, I believe, action when we are meditating. Meditating is an action. Stepping back, retreating is an action that is essential and important. It is not something that we have to undermine or look down upon, I think. And also because, unfortunately, we do live in a very competitive world where products, results, tangible results become so important. This stepping back, is not something that often people do. I remember I've stepped back after almost 8 years of continuously working without a single day off. I stepped back when I was almost about to burn out, when I was almost about to be fallen apart, broken into pieces. And I don't think we need to wait till then. We should not, rather, I think we should, in between, once in a while, keep checking and stepping back. And often while we do this, while I was thinking about this idea of engagement and disengagement, speaking, not speaking, I was thinking about this particular quote by Shantideva from Bodhisattvacharya Avtara. I will leave with that quote and see what comes out of it. Where would I possibly find enough leather with which to cover the surface of the earth, but wearing leather just on the soles of my shoes is equivalent covering the earth with it. This is a popular quote. So Shantideva, I don't know how many of you know, is a 8th century Buddhist scholar who is a very, he has a very funny, interesting story to him. He was studying in Nalanda monastery, 7th, 8th century, around that time in Bihar, close to Gaya, Bodh Gaya. And he was in the monastery, Nalanda monastery, Nalanda university rather than monastery. And everyone used to be diligently going to classes, studying, debating, all that. And whereas Shantideva would be, basically there used to be a joke around in the university that Shantideva does only, eats, sleeps, and shits. He doesn't do anything else. So that used to be the popular notion about Shantideva around. So everyone around was vexed with Shantideva. Like, this person doesn't do anything and doesn't, contribute anything to, simply, eat, sleeps, and shits. So they all decided to, find a way to make him leave the university. So they all said, okay, every student one day need to give a teaching to the community, to the university people, to the university folks. So, and one final day, their idea was that, okay, Shantideva has to teach, and he's poor thing, not studying anything. What will he teach? He won't teach, and he'll leave the monastery. He'll leave the university. When the day came for Shantideva to actually teach, in the beginning he asked people, okay, what do you want me to teach? Do you want me to teach what you already are studying? Do you want me to teach something new that you have not studied yet? So what is that you want me to teach? So basically, they said, oh, you teach anything, and Shantideva started teaching. He started teaching this particular text, what we now call as Bodhisattva Charya Avtara, the way of a Bodhisattva's life. As he started teaching, he started slowly elevating from the ground with each chapter. By the end of the final chapter, he disappeared. So later, the university people had to send people behind him to find him and find him and actually write down what he taught, right? Because it was so important and so precious, it was so beneficial. So this quote is from one of the quotes from the text Bodhisattva Charya Avtara. So basically, it says that you can't find enough leather in the planet, enough leather to cover the entire planet, but you can certainly cover your own feet with leather. There could be many connotations to this particular quote. One is that, okay, you can't change. One regular possible pacifist interpretation could be that you can't change the entire world, so you better take care of yourself. So you better change your own state of mind. But does it really mean you don't care about the world? Does it mean you basically cover your own soles, right? You cover your own feet with leather, you're protected, and you really stop not care about the world anymore because you're safe. You can go around the world without getting hurt and affected. Is that what Shantideva means? Or does it mean, okay, you can't deal with the entire world, or think about how to cover the entire world with leather while your feet are bare themselves? So you take care of your feet first, and you can think about how to help the world. So it is like this. In Buddhist world, the confusion I think often sees that you become liberated, you become wise, you become skillful, only then you engage with the world. Which I thought for quite some time in my life, that's the way to do it. You become more skillful, only then you engage with the world. But I've also come to realize that's not fair to me and also to the world, because there is so much of suffering in the world. If I can actually, there can't be my enlightenment and then the world can be taken care of kind of scenario, but it has to be like a physical health and mental health. We can't say that first we'll take care of physical health and then mental health, or first we'll take care of mental health and then physical health. Both have to be taken care of simultaneously. If someone is going through a major surgery, they need, mental health support to cope, to recover, to go through the surgery, and they need the surgery itself. It can't be what comes first and next, but both need to be taken care of simultaneously. So similarly, when we engage with the world, what is that we look into, I think? Is it about fixing our own self first? But fixing our own self is through fixing the world. And fixing the world is fixing us. So the distinction comes where we, I think, really separate, okay, world is out there and I'm here, kind of thing. It's like, I've recently realized, talking in a panel on environmental crisis and what we call as climate crisis, I've realized the crisis is not of climate, but the crisis is of life itself. And the problem with environmental engagement largely I see is that climate seems to be somewhere else and it is in crisis, and we all somewhere seems to be in our own houses and very protected and safe and all that. But hello, that's not the case. The crisis is of life itself. So similarly, our liberation is not just in our own mind or world out there, but there's no division here to begin with. Both of these things need to be engaged with and taken care of simultaneously. And many times, this engagement also means disengagement. This engagement also means stepping back. This engagement also means retreating, but not for the sake of being fearful, but not for the sake of giving up, but for the sake of becoming more skillful, more able, more willing, and more benefiting, I think. So, well, that's my rambling so far. Let's see. It's anyone wants to pitch in anything, add, comment, please. And what do you think of this particular quote? I often wonder about this quote. And I'm also not sharing what I'm sharing with you all today because I have answers or I figured it out, but because something I continue to struggle to figure out in every day. When you're on the ground, when you do political social activism, and also especially in progressive liberal circles, faith and reflection, introspection, these are not often things that are easily digestible or understandable. You are supposed to be in a continuous action. So it becomes much more so difficult. So I am still figuring out and struggling to figure out answers. How do we as communities, as societies, be okay with stepping back, be okay with, not be always in this get done mode?
Thank you, Venerable. I think that was really helpful for me because that's a question I kind of think about a lot too. Like, how much time do you spend on your own practice? How much time do you spend engaging with the world? You talked about this awesome concept of generosity, and it sounds like it's an act of generosity to, also contribute to the world. And so that is part of the enlightenment practice, and therefore, it's there's no distinguishment, as you said, it's both. I do have a question for you, which is about what did the Buddha actually say? Did he recommend for people to engage while practice, or what proportion of time do you spend on which things, and is it different types of things with different temperaments?
Thank you for that, Sophia. It's an interesting question, I think, because which is something, it's a practical question, right? What amount and to what extent does one, but I think the question itself arises from the point of understanding that somehow that Buddhist practice and the socio-political engagement are two very different things. Whereas it necessarily need not be the case, that they both could be one and same. For example, I remember I'm born and brought up in a Hindu family. And I'm raised as a Hindu in my early childhood and in teen years and all that. And I've studied and extensively tried practicing dabbling with Hinduism when I was young. And the Hinduism, like many would know, is a faith that has a lot of rituals, lot of practices, ritualistic practices. And when when I took refuge, became a Buddhist and started engaging, and I went to both Gaya, for the first time, and went to Mahabodhi Stupa, and I started seeing a lot of people doing circumambulations, which people do in Hindu temples also, and doing prostrations, which people also do in Hindu temples also. I was like, okay, why are people doing this, right? And I was also trying to figure out where does one place this. So my fellow Sangha members helped me understand and learn is that in Buddhism, whether you do a simple prostration or a circumambulation of a stupa, or reciting a mantra, or reading a text, or as simple as this conversation, if any of this is not helping us to transform our mind, and transform to what, right? Transforming our ordinary mind that is filled with afflictions such as anger, hatred, attachment, ignorance, right? Transforming the mind is helping the mind move away from these afflictions towards kindness, love, compassion, wisdom, patience, right? If that is not happening, no matter whether you do 100,000 prostrations in a day, no matter whether you read entire text Bodhisattvacharya Avtara, it doesn't matter. It's practically, in some sense, probably yes, some imprints on mind and mental continuum, but it actually is not serving the purpose. So if one is doing socio-political, activism, engagement with rights and all that, if one can be actually watchful of their mind and see what is happening to their mind in all this work, if it is moving away from, there's nothing Buddhist about it, I think, right? Simply whatever work we do, if we can watch our mind and see, by doing this work, is my mind moving away further from attachment, or is it becoming more clingy? Is it becoming kinder, or is it becoming more aversive? right? Is it becoming more loving or is it becoming more hateful? And that, if that can be watched, I think we are continuously practicing, right? We are continuously practicing with everything that we do. The distinction, no, I mean, there is nothing that cannot be a Buddhist practice in that sense, right? There can be nothing that is not practiced relying on Buddha's teachings, whether it is a doctor performing a surgery, or an engineering making a building, or as simple as an activist going and doing a protest. So the distinction disappears. When the distinction disappears, then you no more need to see, like, for example, look at like His Holiness Dalai Lama, for example, right? Someone who has been thrown away from their homeland. He had to leave his homeland more than 60 years ago, and probably no opportunity to go back in this lifetime again. And would someone like him, even if we consider him, let's say His Holiness Dalai Lama is the 14th Dalai Lama is a 85, 86-year-old senior Buddhist monk, nothing more, nothing extraordinary. But someone at that position in that leadership, can he make a distinction between, especially in the early years, let's think about when in 1950s, when they came to India, can they make a distinction about, okay, from morning 3 to 6, I'll do Buddhist prayers, and 6 to 9, I'll engage with, I'll think about Tibetan people and Tibetan people's survival and communities establishing and all that. It's difficult, right? It is really difficult. That means there is no line here. Through your prayers, through your meditation, through your action, you think about other people's welfare in your mind. And that is the path of the Bodhisattva, right? Whatever you do, you think about other beings' welfare. And that is Buddhist practice. So that way you don't need to think about time. You don't need to worry about it. You don't need to, unless, of course, the problem comes when one looks at Buddhist practice as finishing 10 texts, doing 10 hours of meditation, right? Doing so many prostrations. When you calculate and kind of measure Buddhist practice in those terms, then I think it tends to become, have this difference and lines in between that work, this work, and all, I think. I don't know if I am answering it well, but yeah.
Yeah, you answered it well. Thank you.
And Venerable Tashi, on that last point about there being no distinction between our own enlightenment and the enlightenment of the world, and the Dhamma service and the Dhamma practice, would you say that that's also a deepening of the understanding of non-duality? So there's non-duality of the sense of I and mine and other?
Yeah, very much. No, I mean, recently I remember reading a non-binary transgender rights activist from US, I think. They were writing that how it took COVID for them to teach that the air they breathe and the air the other one, someone else's breathes, is not so different. That suddenly in COVID, we all have become, like masks on, because that one's breathing, that one's air that they breathe in and breathe out could affect me, kind of thing. But that has been the case always, right? It is a continuity of breath that we all share. That is a continuity of life that we all share. We all are not that distinctly separate from each other as we seem to tend to make in this modern world about it, right? We are not that separate from each other. We are so connected with this invisible, unseen, breath, that it actually makes our living possible and impossible, right? I mean, it's simple, but at the same time, something it's so difficult to remember in our kind of world. The other day was, so my parents recently, I'm in Hyderabad, so when I'm in Hyderabad, I stay at my parents' place. So my parents recently moved into a new house, and this new house in a gated community. And from the time I've moved into this gated community, I've been thinking about this idea of gated communities, that there's a wall and there's a group of houses who are in, and there's a gate and the security guard and all that. I was thinking, what is this? They all, of course, often seem to think, my parents and everyone else also seem to think this is about safety and security and all that. But as I think about it, like, sometimes I book an auto on Uber for me to, go to office, go to work. So when the auto comes and stops, the gate guard stops there and, takes the number and all that, takes the name number before allowing the auto person inside. And right next to the gated community is another colony, which has no gate, no security, nothing. People go, people come and all that. I'm like, what about the safety and security of these 33 people houses that is not the case with so many other lines of houses that is next to it, right? Then it struck me, this is nothing but a concept of further dividing down the society and adding more divisions. And somehow bizarrely, the divisions seem to make people feel safe rather than existing in collective, existing with each other. Look at the irony of it, that we feel safe when we are divided from the rest of the world and secluded and protected by a compound wall. But so we don't find safety in collective existence anymore. So we find safety in, you know, isolation. We find safety and also at the same time complain during COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns that, oh, we're isolated, we can't survive this and all that, right? But at the same time, you feel only safe in isolation, not in collective existence. That clearly tells us how much of a divide we have made among ourselves, I think, ironically. But to simply see, hey, our breath is the same breath. It's, you know, one of the old Bhakti poet, Annamacharya, who is a devotee of Lord Venkateshwara, is a Hindu poet and all that. He writes, because in Hinduism, caste is a predominant thing. Like society is divided on the lines of caste, depending on which family you're born. And it's a very, very exploitative, oppressive, violent system. Right? And Annamacharya in one of his poem writes that, you know, it's the same death for whether it is a king or whether it is a very, very poor person from the most lower caste community, disadvantaged community, the caste community. It is same death. You need to go into the same soil. There's not going to be any difference. So I think around us, there is so many opportunities to see, undo the division, to undo the divide, undo the dualism. But we seem to be building on to the dualism, building on to the divide in so many ways, I think, unfortunately.
Thank you, Venerable, for that. I do have some more questions, but there's a question in the chat, so I'll just let the MC deal with that first.
Thank you. I'm reading it. We need prioritized self-care when deciding whether or not to speak up. Sometimes it can take a lot of energy and be exhausting to fight for justice. It can also make one a target. Do we have to first assess whether we have the personal resources to withstand speaking up before we raise our voice publicly? Thank you for that. I think it is important, and I think especially people who come from disadvantaged, underprivileged, marginalized communities, it becomes much more of a task to be careful, and the speaking up becomes a negotiation. Speaking up is for your rights, but speaking up, like you said, can also be very risky. Very like, for example, when you know, Dalit people, people from the so-called lower caste community in India, or even trans people for the matter, when they speak up, like, for example, I'll tell you, when a friend of mine going around searching for a house, to rent a house, and they're a trans woman. They need to find a house, and they're trying to find a house. And they know the only means to get the house is not to, you know, be open about their transness till they find the house. So once they find the house, once they have a rental agreement in place, then they can possibly take up, you know, they can actually come out to be trans to the house owner. Not before that, because before that, they won't find a house if they are trans identifying, right? So that is a negotiation there to actually, to able to get the house and to be in a safer space, to be able to, you know, be openly trans again to your house owner or to your neighbors or anyone else, right? And similar circumstances in your workspace, you know, for example, trans people finding employment is so difficult. You found an employment, and you know, you are there, you got the job, you know, you're a trans person working, but at the same time, you have to be careful. Unfortunately, you have to be careful. You have to be cautious when to speak up, when not to speak up, because you might not get fired for what you speak, but you might get fired for what you speak and speaking for being trans and still speaking. So it is a careful, cautious negotiation one continue to make, I think. A lot of times when young trans people, queer people call me and talk to me on phone that they want to come out to their families, I do often tell them that, do not speak up and do not come out if there is no obvious violence and things, and if you're still studying, stay at your parents' house, finish your studies, and then come out. That way you have education, you have a degree, you are employable, and you can have a life when you come out if your parents choose to throw you out of the house. So speaking up becomes a scary thing, and one has to consciously negotiate and be very cautious with. And the idea of we need to, of course, prioritize our self-care, our own well-being, our own safety. But unfortunately, we do live in a world where the idea of self-care also seems to have become something what it should not. This idea of self-care has become an immense soul burden of me to take care, right? Which should not be the case. Self-care is about taking care of oneself, but taking care of oneself should not be the sole responsibility of that one person. Taking care of oneself should be a collective responsibility. If we all know how to actually take care of each other, I don't think we need to really worry about taking self-care, I think. But unfortunately, yes, we don't live in that kind of world. That means we have to be, the more marginalized you are, the more careful you have to be about your self-care, the more careful you have to be about where you speak up, where you don't speak up. The responsibility about your safety lies on you, which again should not be the case, I think. The safety for someone like me, for example, as I'm a trans person working and living, doing the kind of things I do, when I speak up, like I often tell people, like sometimes when people tell I'm brave, courageous, that I go to police stations, do crisis management, deal with police and, other state missionary and all that, I tell no, I am not brave and courageous at all. I do it because I have to do it. But also I do it because something goes wrong. I know there are 10 other people who will step up to support, to help, and to be there. That is the, that has to be the thing with all of us, I think. It can't be this, somehow this idea of I am brave and courageous is like, because I am brave and courageous. No, I am doing what I'm doing because I know there are people around me. I know that I'm not all by myself. It is that kind of the world we have to, hope to build for, I think, at least. Thank you. Play up or play down Buddhism when thank you for putting it the way you did, Eugene. Yes, while you're doing activism, like for example, as a monastic, it becomes me difficult because my me being a Buddhist is in face all the time because of my robes, I think often I feel. But one has to, and also like, I'll tell you an example, like recently, in Indian political circumstances, there seems to be a lot, in recent times, there's a lot of a divide, a religious divide, and communal harmony is being affected and all that. So some of the people in our state, the state's name is Telangana. So some of the activists and people have come together to form a thing called Telangana for Unity and Peace. Telangana for Peace and Unity, something like that they formed. And which is good initiative and all that. I'm part of the group and all that. And so they were thinking and ideating what kind of activities they should do, what kind of work they should do to promote communal harmony and all that. So I know I'm a visibly out Buddhist monastic trans person activist and all that, but I'm also Buddhist, belonging to religious order, person of a faith, which is not taken easily and lightly in progressive liberal circles. So I wanted to suggest something, but at the same time, I felt, oh, if the suggestion comes from me, it might be viewed in certain way. It might be seen in certain way and might not be, people's biases might come in that sense, looking at me as a religious person. So I had to send the suggestion to another friend and told, hey, this is what I was thinking. Could you post it in the group? So, I don't want to do it because I don't know how people will see it. So I need to play down, or I need to recognize that me being Buddhist sometimes is not actually helpful in what I'm proposing, right? It can say similar can go with all kinds of things, I think. But in case of a Buddhist identity, but also because often when we are a practicing Buddhist, layperson or a monastic, when we seem to give these advices about loving kindness, compassion and things and all that, it's good to be careful about that also, I think, because other people might perceive often that, oh, you are a Buddhist, you're studying all these things, you have whatever this faith in them, and it is easy for you to say all these things. So they might not rather take it in a positive way. They might take it like, oh, this is easy for you and that's why you're saying, right? So it is important, like you said, it is really important to play down the Buddhist part of it often, I think, to think about how can we, whatever we learn in Buddhism, I think we should always often try, how can we present them in the most secular way possible? How can we share them with the world where they don't need to find, they find it difficult to engage with it because of the Buddhist, right? Because many things that Buddhism teaches can be practiced by people whether they are Buddhist or not. It is helpful for people whether Buddhist or not, right? Like, for example, tomorrow I stop practicing, I've stopped being a Buddhist, I can still be benefited from Buddhism and Buddhist teachings, right? And that secular presentation is important, I think, often, and especially in a diverse religious community. And at the same time, playing down and mellowdowning a bit about the religiousness of it is very, very important, I think, because it might often come across as crass and, you know, not very welcoming by many people. So thank you for asking that, Eugene.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. Yeah.
Venerable, I think we should have compassion for the cows rather than putting leather soles on the earth.
Compassion for
the animals, the cattle.
Animals, you're saying?
Yeah, we don't want to be putting leather soles on the earth. We want to be putting rubber soles on the earth.
Yeah, very much. I think, interestingly, in Hinduism, the planet Earth is considered as goddess Vasundhara. So it's actually a living thing in that sense. When you think about it, the Earth is a manifestation of goddess Vasundhara, who is a female goddess. And often the patients, when often, especially women are told to be patient in India, they're often given example of the planet Earth, that look at planet Earth, how patient it is. You dig it, you abuse it, you do all kinds of things, that it is always patient, which is a very terrible example, I think. But I mean, like I said, climate crisis is not elsewhere. Climate crisis is actually life crisis. Yeah. It is a crisis of life. If we don't take care of this planet, if we don't care for other beings, and unfortunately, humans seem to have this very established hierarchy. Like, I remember studying biology in school, we used to have this food chain, right? There's a food chain in biology that humans are on the top, and then other beings on the one by one, who eats who kind of thing. It's built. It is a very screwed up understanding, I think. Like, rather than how we all are dependent on each other, all the beings are dependent on each other, it is more like who is more powerful. And humans somehow seem to have designated themselves to be the most powerful and seem to make decisions about everything and everyone on the planet, I think. I mean, right now in India, it is summers, 40 plus. I remember my early childhood. I was a young kid. I used to be in my grandparents' village, countryside. We barely used to have electricity. We wouldn't have electricity all day. And we could live without a fan. In, you know, temperature was not that bad. And like now, not so long after, it is impossible to live in summers in most parts of this country without an AC, an air condition. And yeah, it's miserable how animals are also treated, I think, that way, not with complete disregard to their life. Today, I think somewhere I was reading an article about angry bees. But I'm not sure if bees themselves are angry, but I think if animals and bees and other beings can be angry at what humans are doing, I think we would have had a you know, much more older revolutions than any other revolution from animals, I think.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, with environmental activism, the governments, well, in Australia for sure, I'm sure other countries have, they've introduced laws. You know, there's Bob Brown over here, you may have heard of. He started off the Greens Party. I think it was the very first Greens Party in the world. And he was chaining himself to trees and things like that before the foresters went in. And he got arrested many times, you know. You see the gutsy people of Greenpeace going out amongst the whaling ships, you know, but what I'm saying is that now, if anyone exposes the cruelty in the farmyards, the government has introduced laws to penalise them. So I guess at that stage you have to retract from doing the activism.
Yeah. And I think ironically, I mean, the problem also comes from because the cruelty towards animals, cruelty towards rest of the beings is often seen as a means of living. And it is not seen as the cruelty, whatever the kind of cruelty one perpetrates, that is actually in many ways being cruel on yourself. Like to the way it affects your mind, the way it actually affects your brain, the anger, resentment, the other ill emotions it builds up in a being. In many ways, it is being cruel on yourself. But because often the cruelty to someone else, someone else is looked down upon. Okay, it's cruelty on them, but it is yes, but it's so much also cruel on yourself, your own mind, your own emotional well-being, your own growth, right? And governments do a lot of things. I mean, I'll tell you, for example, in India, we have plenty many laws. I can tell you, for whatever unfortunate reasons, I think we are not a law-driven country. We are not driven by the law. We are driven by many other things: culture, tradition, religion, right? Laws are mostly, they operate in the police stations, in the parliaments and the House of Representatives and all that. But right outside in the households, in the neighborhoods, laws become really insignificant. I think that's why I often feel that unless the transformation of minds and hearts take place, no matter what other kind of mechanisms we do, they all are going to be a bandages on things. They are not going to be a complete cure. They're not going to be complete healing and complete change. For that, I believe the spiritual perspective into the political activism and engagement, looking at how all of us as people and individuals can transform our own minds, our own hearts, to be more compassionate, more loving, more caring, and more connected with each other, at a much more intimate, much more personal level, is very important, I think, because when I see today, even within the so-called right, people who are on the right side of politics, people who are on the right side of things, we are connected because of political ideologies. We are connected because of things we believe in commonly. We connected because we commonly believe what is right, what is not right. But all this could change. All this is subject to change. But if we are connected at a core level of being compassionate, caring, and loving to each other, no matter what our political stance are, no matter whatever many other opinions and beliefs are, we can still remain connected. Things can keep changing, but the basic connection of loving, caring, compassionate connection that can survive and sustain all other changes, I believe. And that is the connection I believe we all have to somehow need to figure out how to build that connection, how to strengthen that connection.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you, Belle.
Venerable, you might have missed a comment from Mary.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Would you like me to read that out, or?
Yeah, I can also read it up, whatever you like.
Okay, yeah, so Mary said, I understand speaking up in relation to social and political activism. However, I struggle with and am interested to know, what does the Buddha say regarding when to stay silent and when to speak up? When what you have to say is information that is true, but information that may cause deep division and pain within family members who do not want to see, hear, or know the truth. I struggle with the Buddhist concept of the path being about waking up and seeing things for what they are, and living in a world predominantly with people who do not want to see truth.
Thank you, Mary, for that. So, well, what does Buddha say? I mean, Buddha did speak a lot about speech. Venerable Tashi also quite extensively wrote about right speech, loving speech, speech that is loving and kind and compassionate, right? When we live in, whether it is a family or whether it is a community setup, this speech becomes quite a important, crucial thing for our everyday engagement. This speech can can seem to make the day smooth, easier, get things done, but this speech can also create so many problems and hurdles, I think. So often, I think with everyone, not just with our teachers, I think, but with everyone, it would be great if we can be mindful about how or for what am I speaking? Am I speaking for me being right? Or am I speaking in order to contribute to the current situation, whatever the situation might be? If that clarity will help, because often our speech is very rooted in our ego of whether I am right or I know. I know is very egomaniacal many times. I am right can be much more egomaniacal many times, right? So if one is speaking from that place of I know I am right, and then speak up, then that often conveys arrogance, that often conveys a certain kind of hierarchy of placing yourself somewhere and looking down other people. So it is not going to, it won't be a compassionate communication in any way. So it's often good to check that aspect, I think. Am I speaking from that space of being right and righteous, and from the space of, oh, I know it all kind? Or am I speaking from the space because I want to contribute to the ongoing situation to make it better, right? And sometimes one also has to acknowledge, even if that is the space you want to speak from, one has to read the room. Like, for example, if you're in a crisis situation and there is already this us and them divided, there are two different parties and you are already seen as some other party and there is another party in the crisis. And even if you are doing it with your great, all good, positive intentions that I want to help, I want to contribute, if you can read the room and sometimes see that, oh, this could still be misunderstood. The other person is so angry, so upset, so not willing to listen. Even if I say the most right thing, even if I say the most beneficial thing, this person might still perceive it differently. This person could still be angry and upset about it. Then it is a time not to say anything. Then it is a time to step back. Not because you are not right, not because you don't know what to say, but simply knowing this is not the right time to say it, right? This is not the right situation to say it. So, and one, you need to see the time, what is the right time to speak? And the other, you need to think about the right language, in a sense, right tone and the right language to speak, right? And the intention, the time, and the language, these are crucial parts that, and also often we tend to speak with the idea that we want to be the last person to have the last word. Like somehow we all want to have the last word, but it's good to not be in that place, I think. Try not to be in that place, I think. And often, I mean, I come from LGBT community, queer community. I mean, our communities have survived on gossiping and bitching for a long time. And they continue to. So it becomes often trickier, what kind of gossip is okay and not okay, right? I mean, So some gossip is important, I think, in order to vent out, in order to, share, in order to build that bonding and all that. But a gossiping that is not maligning, that is not with any malign intent, harmful intent is important, I think. Similarly, when you see that there's a possibility, sometimes you say the truth, but it might still end up, like you said, divide people, divide relationships. One has to assess the situation. It has to be based on situation to situation. You check your intention, you check the time, you read the room in which you're communicating this, people who are communicating it, and the tone and the language you're using. One has to be careful about all these things and then communicate whatever you want to communicate rooted in compassion and kindness. But the most important part, even including all these things, is that irrespective of what all these things are like, your communication might not always tend to result in the results that you expect. So you be prepared that it could result in something else, right? It simply means the other side is still not in a place to receive your communication. And often our communication might not be beneficial in the right given time. But in retrospect, when people think about it later, it could be beneficial to them, right? So expecting the immediate good results about our communication and thinking that everyone will praise every time I say something nice is something also one need to become free of, I think, because sometimes you say the nicest things, the other person, because if they are crappy and not in a good state of mind, can take it completely in a different way and actually yell back at you. You'll be like, I said something so nice, I appreciated you, and you're yelling at me, and right? But later the person might actually think about it, right? So some amount of detachment with the consequences of the speech is also important, I think, along with the intention, time, tone, language of the speech. I hope this answers at least something.
Thank you so much, Venerable. There's so much wisdom in what you've said, and I'm very grateful. You've given me a great deal to think about and to ponder. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venerable Tashi and everyone. And I think it is time.
Yeah.
We invite you to give a dedication of merits, Venerable, if that's okay?
Sure. I generally like this particular dedication prayer. Let me quickly, this is again by Shantideva, which I often find quite amazing because this 8th century monastic scholar thought about world and thought about different scenarios, and that's continue to remain relevant even today in our 2022, and still seem to that we have so much more to learn from this one particular text. So these are a compilation of lectures, compilation of verses from this text, Bodhisattva Charya Avtara, and these are often used as dedication prayer. So in Buddhist tradition, like you all know, of course, one is in the beginning the intention, but towards the end the dedication. The idea of dedication is not necessarily in magic happening, I think, but to reaffirm the practice that we are not doing this for ourselves. We are not doing any of it for ourselves, but for the sake of other beings, for the sake of other beings' well-being. And it is in other beings' well-being, there is my well-being, right? Like one of my teachers says that Buddha is so skillful a teacher that Buddha tries to cut down the selfishness through selfishness. That means I am thinking about other people's well-being because in other beings' well-being is my well-being. If everyone else is well and happy and good, I am happy and good. If there is no suffering around me, there's no way I can suffer, right? So it is cutting the selfishness through the selfishness. I'm still selfish, seeking my well-being, but I'm seeking it through other people's well-being. Not anymore just about me. It is no more about me. My well-being is not about me. So everything that we do, the hours of conversation that we have here is not about me, is not just about us, but it is about all other beings, their well-being, and in turn, my well-being. So I'll quickly read a few verses from Bodhisattva Charyavatara. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the beings that are blind see forms, and the beings that are deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food, may the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy, may the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvest. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all those who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. As long as space remains, as long as transmigratory beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the suffering of transmigratory beings. Thank you, everyone. Take care, be well, be safe. Hope to see you all again sometime. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Venerable, so much for sharing your experiences and wisdom. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for participating and holding space. I gained so much out of this and out of your tips and out of your experiences that you've shared. So really thank you for it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and before we finish off, next week we have Dr. Chen Hong speaking about finding joy on the Buddha's path. So we spoke about joy today, so it'd be good to find out more about joy on the Buddha's path next week as well. And as Sophus shared, we have the Metta Festival coming up. So what is the Metta Festival? Well, it's a celebration of diverse cultures in Buddhism. It's about bringing friends and family together. It's about everything we've talked about today, kind of. There will be talks, performances, stores. It will be fun. It's a fun way to share your beautiful practices and vibes and see how other people have put the Dharma teachings into practice as well. So we really hope to see you there. Anything that I've missed? Nope. Okay, well, hope to see you all next week. And thank you again, Venerable.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable. Thanks, Elise. Great emceeing. Thanks, everyone, for joining. See you next week and see you at the Metta Festival.
Thank you so much.